I hate the cliche of like, oh, we're at a tipping point. Quite frankly, we're at a tipping point.
Letting this industry just kind of fade away would be catastrophic.
It is extraordinarily challenging to keep a logging business going. I've been using savings, lines of credit to get this far through the winter.
To have a sawmill, you need to have a supply of wood. You need loggers to keep this whole thing rolling.
I only have a certain number of days left to produce enough timber and revenue to get through mud season.
Sawmills and paper mills and firewood processors and chip plants are unique as far as development goes. They're providing land use opportunities to enhance the health of our forests.
Rural enterprises don't have the profit margin to keep up with the environmental permitting. And I don't think we should reduce our environmental protection, but we need to do it more efficiently.
Scaling regulation appropriately to business size. So smaller businesses have smaller regulations, larger businesses have larger regulations. Our wastewater environmental laws are one example. There's fees for violation of the wastewater laws that to a small business would destroy the business. So they have to come into complete compliance even though many of these laws are really prohibitive. But then to a large business, they'll just work it into their budget to pay the fees and not comply with any of the laws because the fees are the same regardless of the size of the business.
There are many examples of other states that can get a business permitted and up and running without years and years and years.
We shouldn't have to get an Act 250 permit at all, okay? Maybe some kind of an environmental permit, we understand. Are you building it so that you're protecting water quality, that the neighbors understand what's going on? And
we've seen examples of people taking 3 years to get a permit to make firewood through Act 250, and it's too much.
We are losing some critical infrastructure in the state.
It wasn't that long ago that virtually every small town had a sawmill of one kind or another. One by one, they disappeared.
In 1980, there were approximately 60 sawmills operating in the state of Vermont.
we're down to 16 mills of any size in Vermont.
Now a lot of that wood gets shipped up to Quebec to be processed or elsewhere.
These logs behind me, some of that lumber is going to end up on another side of the continent.
It's very different today than it was 20 years ago when you had a lot of places to send your wood. There was a high demand and the value of that wood was much greater than it seems to be today.
If we care about local, the more mills we lose, that would just be that much more wood leaving the state, which means that many more jobs leaving the state, which means that much more carbon being emitted to then get wood processed that comes back to us as consumers.
Anytime we transport material, we increase the carbon footprint of that material.
If they're serious about reducing Vermont's carbon footprint, they should be among the strongest supporters of working forests and the sawmills that depend on the harvest of those working forests.
I would like nothing better than to give them a tour. You could see the growing timber, you could see a fresh clear cut, you could see one that's 20, 30 years old, see one that's 50 years old.
I sent out a postcard, a kind of legislative update with me standing in front of a bunch of logs from our forest tour, and I was actually surprised at the number of constituents who reached out and they were like, oh, I can't believe we're cutting down trees. And again, there's this piece of maybe to some people that doesn't look pretty. When I look at that, it's like someone grew this, like we grew a carrot, and they were thoughtful about how to harvest it in a way that doesn't create runoff and, leaving a tree making space for the tree next to it to grow. When you make a table out of that or you put your deck out of that, you're using a renewable resource instead of something made out of plastic or steel or concrete, and that's incredible.
This whole system goes from the forest to the landowner, to the forester, to the logger, to the trucker, to the primary manufacturer, to the secondary manufacturer, to the consumer.
When we choose wood, we're using a renewable resource that we can grow here and support our neighbors who are doing that work, harvesting and manufacturing those products. And we're actually, in most cases, reducing our fossil fuel use. And that's something that we should really be celebrating.
I would love to see another 17 sawmills built in Vermont in the next 20 years.
At one point, the largest sawmill in the state of Vermont was up at West Burke. They had an output, I think it was 100,000 board feet per day. They had what I call an ugly neighbor who was determined to use the Act 250 complaint process to shut him down. And he was successful. It's gone.
That says a lot about our regulatory environment.
Act 250 is designed to protect the working landscape. So farms are exempt from Act 250, but under Act 250, even a small family-run sawmill is regulated the same as a Walmart.
Christy could show you their Act 250 papers, like that thick, of what we can and can't do.
You know, over the past 30 years, we've lost 4 to 6 weeks of frozen ground conditions. That's when we do a lot of our logging, and so during those time periods where you are able to actually, harvest wood, and the mills can really get, large flow of wood during those time periods. They want to be running, if they can, 24 hours a day on the weekends. Those truckers want to be bringing material, all hours.
We go to Boston and back daily in the wintertime. You don't necessarily get back at 5 o'clock at night. So after the first ruling they had, we couldn't get in here at night after 5. You got to pay big bucks to get expert testimony, and the ones that are appealing it, or the neighbors, don't have to spend a nickel.
I think the Rural Caucus is a tremendous group in the State House.
It's a tripartisan group of legislators who come together to advocate for rural Vermont.
They are making a difference.
It doesn't matter what party or what county, what district they're from, they really care. And I was a real eye-opener for me when I worked in the State House, working with legislators from Burlington on rural issues.
People are flocking to Vermont for a reason, and it's for our rural Vermont that they want to move to.
The Rural Caucus has an Act 250 agenda, truly folding that industry into the working landscape where it belongs and regulating it appropriately, more similarly to agriculture, as opposed to treating it the same as any other development.
I mean, we were 18, 19 months into Act 250 permit for this place and $70,000 in permitting to build a 50 by 136 building and to change a little bit of our yard space. 70 grand.
We need to change the narrative.
Timber harvesting is sustainable in Vermont.
And if we value those forests, we need to value the whole system, the whole forest economy that supports them.
It's critical that our voters understand what's going on around them in rural Vermont.
A lot of times, the narrative that seems like it makes the most sense when you hear it is not going to be the one that's true.
We're not going to let our communities be ignored anymore. We're going to advocate for what we need. We're going to tell our stories, and we're going to, be a part of figuring out how to make a Vermont that works for everybody.
Can you imagine a local renewable resource that contributes positively to our local economies and our working landscape, and that can be harvested while we help an ecosystem heal? And what could be better than that?